play. And another foul on Ward. His third for setting a screen.
Because of physical play, although Jordan Taylor just got caught with a moving screen.
Pick and roll. And a foul. Offensive foul coming up. Ken Valentine standing right there.
Izzo dying for a moving screen.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of the Moving Screen podcast. I'm Brendan Quinn of The Athletic, Dylan Burkhart of UM Hoops on the other side. Dylan, it is Monday morning, February 24th. There are 2 weeks remaining in the regular season. There's 1 week remaining in February. It's our time. This is it.
It's go time. I'm excited. I'm ready to punch a clipboard like Archie Miller.
We got people demanding on Twitter that we go back to twice a week pods, which we will try to do.
We'll have to step it up this week
as we can. It's not always easy, but we could certainly try. But things are very, very interesting in the Big Ten, and there's a lot to discuss here. And we're going to do. We're going to go through the whole league today, buying and selling for March. We will, of course, though, start with Michigan State. But before that, little order of business. Dylan, what do you have going on UM Hoops that people should look forward to? And if there's anyone dumb enough out there to not be subscribing, why they should subscribe?
So this is our time of year, right? So it's all Michigan Hoops all the time. It has been all year, but now we have written a lot of stuff over the last couple weeks. You can see latest bracketology projections. You can see recruiting. Ethan wrote about Franz Wagner at Purdue yesterday or Saturday. So all sorts of stuff, and we'll be churning away all week too. What can they find over at theathletic.com?
Well, I was in Piscataway. I said a three-city trip that I just wrapped up from Piscataway to Lincoln to West Lafayette and home again. Wrote about Michigan being very much looking like a team that's made for March. Wrote about a really interesting game in Nebraska and a lot of father-son elements at play in the Michigan State-Nebraska game. That might sound cheesy, but I think the story worked out. And then yesterday, or a day or two ago, whenever the hell that was, in West Lafayette, had a conversation with Franz Wagner in a back hallway at Mackey Arena and shared that with the people. Also wrote a column late last week on John Beilein and kind of my thoughts on him and what did and didn't work out and why, and kind of able to lean on many years of covering the guy. So that was actually requested from our kind of NBA side, like our NBA editors were saying, we need someone to kind of be able to talk about some perspective on Beilein himself, and I was kind of charged with that. So that column is up there. And this week, big week of games for both teams. Tuesday night in East Lansing, I'll be there for a battle of two second-place teams in the Big Ten, Michigan State versus Iowa, a lot on the line there. And then Thursday, Michigan, which is all the way up to 7th place, but probably playing way above its current place in the standings, playing or hosting 2nd place Wisconsin, another big game. That's on Thursday, so much more to come this week. A couple features coming up, all the good stuff. So with that, let's get into this thing. Dylan, who do you want to start with?
Let's start with Michigan.
Okay. Obviously, especially with Maryland losing yesterday, you probably have to call Michigan the hottest team in the Big Ten. Right now, I looked up, just pared down the old Bart Torvik T rank to just the month of February. Michigan, number 1 in the country in that span. Number 1 in defense, number 16 in offense. Wins in 7 of their last 8 after a 2-6 start in the Big Ten.
You want to brief me on those 2-6 start stats again?
How about that? Must wins. So, all right.
So
what do you got?
The big takeaway on Michigan? I mean, I think I'm definitely buying Michigan at this point. I think the smart buy would have been back in January when we probably had that previous podcast.
Mm-hmm.
The big thing for me with Michigan right now is the defense. They're playing, I think you just said, best defense in the country in February, and they are probably somewhere around 80, 90, somewhere in there in January. That's a huge difference, and that's what has fueled this kind of resurgence by Michigan. And it's not just Isaiah Livers. He's played in some of these games over the last month, but not all of them. Michigan is just a better defensive team from 1 through 5, really 6 through 8 too, right? So they're just all locked in defensively, defending the paint a lot better. I wrote a story last week about how much their interior defense has improved, and it's just really night and day from where it was in January.
Yeah, and you know what? Like, everyone's talking about the defense right now, and rightly so. I 100% get it, as they should. But, like, pretty quietly, I mean, the offense playing pretty well. Things are definitely trending in the right way, like, across the board for Michigan on both sides of the ball. The massive changes in the defense are obviously what sticks out the most, but conference-only games, it's the number 2 offense in the Big Ten right now. Got some numbers here. Number 1 in turnover percentage, number 2 in 2-point field goal percentage, and that's even despite Teskey's kind of struggles to finish around the rim. That's obviously much talked about, but the point being, like, the offense it checks a lot of boxes right now, and obviously you want to see a team be a better 3-point shooting team probably going into March than Michigan is overall, but they have 3-point shooters. Isaiah Livers being back in the lineup changes that dynamic greatly. I don't know. And Xavier Simpson is the guy that he was supposed to be all along right now. And my question to you...
Newsflash, Xavier Simpson's the guy he was all along. There's this idea that somehow what Xavier Simpson is doing has changed this month than before. I don't really see that.
I think he's playing better in the last 3 weeks than he has at other parts of the season. I don't think he's been this level all year long. That's fine. I mean, I know you are the champion of champions for Xavier Simpson.
That you're missing out on the point that everyone else around him is playing better, right?
I don't disagree. I also think that the way that they were playing, that their way of playing also affected him. He clearly had times of frustration this year when he is drilling guys in the chest and we're just bricking shots left and right, and then that would lead to him maybe doing a couple uncharacteristic things here and there. That's all I'm saying.
Sure, but my bigger point is Michigan's offense has actually been pretty good throughout the Big Ten season, even when they were losing games in January. This week, I think, is a great example of that the defense has turned it around where at Purdue, Michigan's offense was perfect for 4 minutes and pretty much shitty for 36. They couldn't make shots. I mean, I think Painter said after the game in the first half or the second half, Michigan just missed a bunch of wide open shots. Michigan runs great offense, like you say. They don't turn the ball over. They generate open shots. It's just making those open shots that has been a problem for this team consistently, or they're consistently inconsistent, right? So they've had that issue, but I think the fact that you still generate good looks even when they're missing is a good sign for the offense. But I just think it's important to point out, like, Michigan's offense didn't shoot its way into these games. It was just the defense never allowed Rutgers or Purdue to put together more than a couple baskets in a row. And when you create that margin for error, you are in a lot more comfortable spot, right? It's easy to make a big shot at Mackey when it's to turn an 11-point lead into a 13-point lead, right? Like, that is just, and that's all from the defensive effort, and Michigan just has been locked down on that side of the ball in a way it really wasn't dating back till November, right? December was a mess defensively too. So it's not just Isaiah Livers. It's that the whole defense has kind of figured out how it needs to prepare for these games, I would say.
You've loved to talk about the schedule weights, and it's when you play and where and et cetera, et cetera. How much of this defensive renaissance do you weigh to who they've played here in the last 8 games?
Well, the one thing you have to point out is the only team in the Big Ten who's good at scoring points is Iowa. So if you're not playing Iowa, your defense is going to look pretty good. I mean, those Iowa games really skewed a lot of the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that you can compare games against Purdue or Rutgers to like Minnesota on the road early in the conference season, right? I also think you can look at Purdue and Rutgers as 2 teams that we're probably both going to sell later in this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And Michigan's hitting those teams on the way down, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that did Michigan cause them to sink, or were they already sinking? That's always a hard thing to talk about. But the point that you can take away is that Michigan played well in all these games. They haven't really been in any other wins have not been particularly close, right? So that is something that you can take something for. But it is the schedule, just like it was the schedule when we talked about it in January.
Yep. I agree.
I mean, I think you have to point that out.
And if it weren't for that, the defensive performance that they had against Michigan State when they held them under a point per possession, I would be inclined to say, like, is this a little bit of smoke and mirrors, or is this legit? Are they really playing defense that well? But because there's that performance against Michigan State there, and even holding, I know they lost that game, but they held Ohio State to 61 points the game before that. Because of those 2 performances, I'm buying not only Michigan, but I'm buying that the defensive thing is very real.
Yeah, I it's hard to say that. I mean, is it the best defense in the country? Right. Whatever, maybe not, but Michigan's playing at a level defensively that it can make a run in March, I would say. And yeah, they haven't played a lot of great offenses, but I wouldn't worry that much. I think it's all going to come down to Michigan runs great stuff on offense, like you said. If Michigan makes shots on a neutral floor in March, it's going to be a really dangerous team. Mm-hmm. And that's sort of the great wild card, right? You look at a guy like Franz Wagner. I think he's hit a 3 in 19 of 23 games, mm-hmm. but he's shooting 30%. If he hits 2 threes out of 8 every game, or 2 threes out of 6, all of a sudden the entire game is different for Michigan. So that's what you look at as this team's kind of untapped potential offensively, where, I mean, they have played better on neutral floors. All of a sudden shots start falling. It's a completely different look, right?
Yeah. And like the thing that I like, now that the defense is kind of offers a kind of foundation for success offensively, like I just like the fact that not only Simpson is Simpson, but then you have multiple pieces around him that can get you on any given day. Livers can put 20 on a team any day. Wagner can put 20 on a team any day. Teskey does his thing. And then you got these auxiliary pieces like Brandon Johns. Even I know he's scored. He's got Otis has a bad toy. Hold on, he's got the hippo. Hold on. All right, we're back. Because look at Brandon Johns. I feel like is a perfect example of this. He scored 3 points total in the last 2 games, and you're talking about a guy that in league play is shooting 43% on threes, 61% on twos. Has had these moments of really. He's 3rd in the league in effective field goal percentage, and he's like an auxiliary option on this team right now. And I do feel like that when you talk about teams that are kind of built for March runs, like that's what you want to see. When you're just solely reliant on 2 guys, it's really, really hard to string together games where those 2 guys play at that level. And this team is not that. It's not so heavily weighed in any direction.
Yeah, I mean, think about maybe 2 months ago, we kept talking about who's Michigan's secondary creator going to be, who's Michigan's secondary creator going to be. I think with Isaiah Livers and Franz Wagner in the rotation, you have a really versatile ability to exploit mismatches. Franz Wagner was just so effective against Purdue because Purdue didn't have someone to guard him. They switched Sasha Stefanovic, Evan Boudreau on him, and he just was able to attack those mismatches in a way where he can shoot, drive, post up, pass, do anything you want. Isaiah Livers is the same way.
Yeah.
Those guys, you're going to have to put a lesser defender on one of them, and I think they both have developed to the point where they can really kind of attack those mismatches in a way that, like, Wagner wasn't able to do that in November.
Mm-hmm.
When he was dribbling into the paint, he was losing the ball, couldn't catch it. Like, he looked lost. So his ability to be some of that secondary guy is really intriguing. Same as David DeJulia is coming off the bench and now looks a lot more comfortable hitting shots. Played probably his best defensive game he's ever played at Purdue. Like, everyone's in a role that really fits, and no one's really in a stretch assignment right now. I'd say, like, you've been able to take the pressure off everyone. Even Xavier Simpson isn't playing as many minutes because they are comfortable with a DeJulius Livers lineup for 3 or 4 minutes every half. That's a big, I think, just break in pressure that makes things easier on Simpson. Teskey has a reliable backup. He's not playing 32 minutes a game. He's playing 28, right? Like, that all plays a part, and I think that helps explain why this Michigan team looks so much better now than it did in December or January.
Right. And one more thing on this, just because it's kind of touched on something that I did in my story on Wagner, was, talking with him. One of the things that I think people need to kind of include in the conversation about him in his freshman year is all of the circumstances that have kind of played out. And it's obviously the broken shooting wrist early in the year, right? So kind of hard to get going when you're coming off of that injury. You miss your first 4 games, and then you run into this gauntlet of 7 high major games to start your career. And then I think that the flu that he had around the holiday, if people remember, was much more impactful than people ever really gave it credit for. If you remember, he only played 17 minutes in back-to-back games, which is a huge dip from what he's done all year. I mean, he basically walked in the door and has been playing 25, 28, 30, 35 minutes. He played 17 minutes in back-to-back games. He was really sick. He lost 10 pounds in that. When he got to campus, he was 205. They got him up to about 212, and then he dropped to 202 after that flu. You're talking about a guy who's 6'9". He's been really playing his way back, not only into playing form, but back into shape. Like, you talk about him losing the ball all those times. It's like that, all those things, a weak wrist, losing weight. No wonder you're losing the ball when you're going into the paint, especially in this league, right? The guy that you're seeing now, I think, is, if in a perfect world, if none of this stuff happened, is a dude who basically would have been closer to this all year long and probably would be right up there with Kofi Coburn and Trace Jackson Davis as freshman of the year. And who knows what he does here in the last 2 weeks. Maybe he kind of makes a surge, but I don't know. It's just, I feel like the guy who is playing right now was there all along. He just kind of wasn't able to put it all together or really have the opportunity to.
Yeah, well, here's what I always look at. He's playing 30-plus minutes every single night as a freshman on a team with other pieces on it, right? Like, it says something about how people view him in terms of his role and everything else, that I think that is pretty clear that there's higher expectations for him than what he's done. You look at his KenPom comparables, and they're all like one-and-dones and lottery picks because basically talented freshmen who play a lot despite maybe not crazy shooting numbers because that talent's there. So that's fascinating to me just because if you look at what Michigan's season's going to swing on in March, if he can go and kind of play his best 10 games of his career, all of a sudden the postseason expectations look a little different,
To rattle off a couple of those comparisons, Kevin Knox, Otto Porter, Jason Tatum. Pretty good.
Not bad.
Pretty good. Okay, so let's hop over to Michigan State here. Probably Michigan is an easy buy. I don't see anyone going otherwise on that. Michigan State, a little more complicated. I'll start off here. It's obviously the losing has been kind of confounding. They started 5-0 in the league and are now 10-6. But the computers still love Michigan State. All the games they win, they dominate, and the losses they have are super close. I'm buying Michigan State still. What are you? Do you want to say what you got, and then we'll go back and forth?
So, if anyone could just use a quiet week and a half off, with only a game at Nebraska, it's sort of like the perfect reset, I would say. It's funny to me to think about it being controversial to buy Michigan State, who's the highest ranked Ken Palm team in the conference. Right?
Yeah.
It's kind of a slap in the face, easy buy, if you ask me. They lost some close games. They wanted, and they also still have a real chance to share the Big Ten title. So I think it's easy to overreact to where you are in the schedule, just like it was with Michigan early in the year, right? I think it's a pretty easy buy. I think you're looking at a game Saturday that's probably could end up being for a share of the Big Ten championship, right? So everything's still right there. Michigan
they should have beat, and let's say they should have beat Maryland the last time. Absolutely.
Yeah. Michigan State can avenge both of its home losses.
Absolutely.
And then all of a sudden you're reset right where you want it to be. And you're going to tell me what? Michigan State can't go into Bryce Jordan and win? Give me a break.
I don't disagree. So the thing that sticks with me right now is the turnovers, man. It's just, you would have thought that by now this would be figured out, but they somehow managed to regress even still. They have 3 players ranked in the top 30 in the Big Ten in turnover rate in Big Ten games. Aaron Henry's 8th, Cassius is 17th, Rocket is 27th. The team itself is dead last in the conference in turnover rate, 21% in road games. Turnovers are not schedule dependent, right?
No.
You know what I mean, right?
They're usually not. And Michigan State's turnovers are going too fast dependent, right?
Yeah.
Do you think so? We talk a lot about how Michigan State speeds up in the non-conference and slows down in Big Ten play. They really haven't slowed down this year. Yeah. They're 99th in adjusted tempo. The last 5 years, they've finished somewhere over 200th in adjusted tempo. Do you think that playing at that pace and still trying to push the tempo so aggressively is part of the turnover?
Maybe.
Problem?
I'm going to be at a Tom Izzo press conference in about 2.5 hours. That sounds like a perfect question to me. Yeah, you're right. They're 5th in the league in tempo in conference play. Last year, 8th. The year before that, 7th. Year before that, 8th. Maybe that's it. I think a lot of it also is just there's not taking care of the ball, and the fact that they can go from half to half being completely different teams tells you that it's either locked in, that it's stuff going on with Cassius, whatever. But it's definitely a concern. I still think this team could possibly go 3-1 on the way out. I think 2-2 would be the safe bet. 3-1, I think, would be my.
Yeah, I would say 3-1 is almost a baseline. I don't think I like Michigan State beating Iowa, Penn State, and Ohio State.
Okay.
Pretty straightforward, in my opinion. I think Penn State's a sell. We'll get to them later. So
yeah, that would leave Michigan State in the depending on what happens in the Big Ten tournament as a 2 or 3 seed in the NCAA tournament, and then all of the hemming and hawing about the last couple months is out the window, right? And then you get to just kind of completely restart your season and just try to ride Cassius and Xavier Tillman in the NCAA tournament as a 2 or 3 seed after all that, right?
Yeah, you look at Michigan for an example of what a 2-0 week can do, right? Everyone's talking about Michigan completely differently after it wins at Rutgers and Purdue. If Michigan State goes and beats Iowa and Maryland, everyone's going to be like, oh, Michigan State's back March 4th. I mean,
right.
The schedule writes the narrative before it even happens. You could have just written this script. I mean, maybe not a home loss to Penn State or whatever, but it all plays out kind of the same way every year. And I feel like half the time on this podcast, we just spend time telling people not to overreact to one game or 1 week, but that's kind of where we're at this point. I don't know. Michigan State's one of the 3 teams in the Big Ten that you would say can make the Final Four. There's a lot of teams that are having good Big Ten seasons that I'm not touching in the NCAA tournament. Yeah. You know what I mean? And Michigan State is not one of those teams.
This is something to watch, and I wouldn't be surprised if this kind of becomes a little bit of a talking point coming up here, because there's something observed from Nebraska, but it does. So did you see the stuff with Kyle Lawrence comments in the locker room and all that stuff? Graham Couch.
Saw the headline.
It was a good column by Graham Couch about basically in the locker room at halftime, Kyle Arnes was the one that came in, got in front of the coaches and was calling guys out and yelling and cursing and blah, blah, blah. And like Kyle Arnes is one of those guys that like he doesn't do that. So when he does do it, it actually does have, if it's not hot air, it's effective. Xavier Tillman, I think, is leading a little bit more. And I do wonder if there could be a little bit of a dynamic here where Arnes and Tillman really kind of try to take on the leadership role, whatever needs to be done, verbal stuff, and let Cassius Winston just play basketball at this point, because it feels like the weight of the goddamn world has been on this dude's shoulders here. Like, given everything that's been going on, like the fact that he's even playing is incredible as it played through this whole thing, but asking him to also lead a basketball, like be a leader of men when you're trying to take care of your own shit with yourself and your family is probably a bit too much. Let Tillman, Arnes take care of running the team. Let Cassius Winston be a point guard, and that's it. I don't know. It's just something that you just kind of wonder, because there has been a need for some dynamics internally to change. And if maybe that's it, maybe that is how this thing actually plays itself out. I don't know. Just a hypothetical, something to watch for. Anything else on Michigan State? What do you got?
No, I think that's pretty. I think we're buying Michigan State, and huge week. This weekend will be pretty fascinating game, especially how that game in East Lansing played out.
Mm-hmm. From a selfish standpoint, it's always a good year when it's the last week of February, and I still have no idea which team I'm going to go with in the NCAA tournament. That means things are very interesting. And I do wonder if there could be a third matchup between these two at some point here. It could be very interesting.
I would not be surprised.
No, not
just
at all.
Based on how both teams are playing.
All right, let's get into the league. We're going to kind of rapid fire here through the other 12. Buying, selling, no holding this time, because that's chicken shit.
Of blowback.
Bunch of chicken shit there. So none of that. Maryland, your first place Maryland Terrapins, which have basically had this thing for the last 10 days, 14 days. It looked like it was pretty much locked up. We'll see how interesting they make it. Before yesterday's loss, Maryland won 9 straight. They can go 2-2 in their final 4 games to assure a clinch of a share, right? By my math.
I believe that's right.
If they go 3-1, they're assured an outright title. So, obviously, great position for the Terps. Games aren't exactly easy, but nothing too daunting in terms of just finishing 2-2. They go to Minnesota, they host Michigan State, they go to Rutgers, and they host Michigan. What do you think on the Terps? Buy or sell?
I'm buying. Just as far as, I'm not even talking about just the Big Ten race. I think this is a team that,
let's preface this. I did my buy and sells like on March, big picture for March. Okay.
I'm doing it basically what you think of a team on a neutral court in the NCAA tournament or at home if you're Northwestern. But I think that Maryland, I like having a senior point guard. I think Sticks does everything you need from him. The thing that I've been trying to figure out with Maryland is they shoot the most threes in the league, and they're not a great 3-point shooting team. I think that gives them upside. Other people might disagree, but those shots could fall at any time, and I think that gives them a chance to make a run. And the defense has been pretty much rock solid all year. So I will buy Maryland.
Agreed. I'm also buying. I thought that game at Ohio State yesterday, they're a better team than Ohio State. That game, it was a weird game. The technical on Cowan with 3 minutes left was absurd. He was not trying to kick Wesson in the head. He was pissed off about a terrible call, and that's how he reacted. And they decided to say that he was trying to kick the guy in the head, which is nonsense. If he stays in the game, who knows what happens? He's a killer in the last 3 minutes.
You are now an Anthony Cowan stan. How
about it? Oh, can we not use this expression stan? It's so stupid. Let's get out of here with that. All right. Also in that game, Wesson was allowed to get away with murder. But Anywho, my big takeaway from that game was not that they lost. It was that Wiggins scored 20. Ayala scored 16. Dante Scott, who I love, scored 10. Morcell scored 8. Like, there are all these auxiliary pieces, and it goes to kind of what you're talking about. Like, if guys start hitting threes, Maryland is really good, really quick. You can't ignore the fact that they're 15-0 at home and have done so much damage there, but I buy Cowan, and I love that they can. It's basically since they kind of played a lot of this 5-out stuff kind of over the second half of the year, they've looked a lot like Michigan with Franz Wagner, and maybe or maybe not, it's a coincidence that there's a former Michigan assistant on that staff, but they're kind of using Smith in a Wagner-esque style, and it works for them. So I like them to at least get a share, obviously, but also a second weekend team in the NCAA tournament.
Which would be big for
That'd be
Mr.
big.
Turgeon.
My biggest question is, if they lose in the first round, I feel like Turge could get fired. If they go to the Elite Eight, I feel like Turge could try to turn it into a different job and jump ship anyway, which will all be fascinating to see. All right, so now we get into this group of all these 10-6 teams. There's 4 10-6 teams tied for second place, and all are projected by Ken Palm to go 12-8. What is the best of the? First of all, what's the best of the 10-6 teams?
Michigan State.
Michigan State. Okay. Let's start here with Iowa, because that's who Michigan State is playing tomorrow night. Buying or selling?
I think it's just crazy to buy a Fran McCaffrey team at this point in the calendar. I feel like we all know what's coming, but I can't buy. I can't do it. I'm selling.
Yeah.
And it was a good week. Like, they won at Minnesota, beat Ohio State at home. That's a good week. I just can't do it.
I tend to agree with you. I have selling here on my little note page. Yeah, they're playing without C.J. Frederick, and that might not mean much. That name might not mean much to a lot of people, but he's a 47% 3-point shooter. It sounds like he's close to returning. I do like them more with him, but end of the day, they're still number 12th in the league in defense. But goddamn, I mean, Garza is just a monster. His last 6 games, he's averaging 26.5 points, shooting 70% on twos while attempting 12 a game. I mean, I know you're not a Garza guy.
Is he a lock for Big Ten Player of the Year?
He has to be at this point. I don't know how you could really go anywhere else.
What if Iowa doesn't get a double bye? Does that affect it for you?
It doesn't affect me too much. He's just been such... I mean,
statistically,
what is Iowa
the numbers
without
are
him?
insane.
The numbers are completely insane. And what is Iowa without him?
My issue is I tend to lean toward the best player on the best team because it's easier to put numbers up.
Problem is that Maryland's two best players cancel each other out.
That is the problem, but that's what I was trying to say is, like, you can't be that good of a team when you have a team built like Iowa around Luka Garza.
Yeah.
And that enables to get a lot of his production, right?
Yes.
So that's where I go back and forth on, like, should you be punished because you have good teammates and you play on a better team? Or should you just reap all the rewards when you are Luka Garza, just getting every single bucket like a monster? I don't know. I was shockingly good as the only real offensive team in the Big Ten. I just worry about that defense come postseason. I mean, they're 92nd in adjusted defensive efficiency. Every other relevant Big Ten team is in the top 50. Like, how's that possible? Like, you had to be able to do something on defense, but winning 2 games without Frederick shows maybe there's a little more to this team. I don't know. It'll be interesting how they close, I think. I mean, they're still technically, they could win out and be in the race for the Big Ten title, right? I mean, they're Tuesday upset at Michigan State away from really being in that conversation.
Big time. Yeah, I would like to see that Michigan State game, but at the same time, it's like, I don't know. I just wonder if it was Iowa playing in a different uniform, what I would think of them.
They don't play any defense. I mean, they still don't play any defense.
I know.
It's just that it's so ingrained.
But in terms of this, it's like the feeling of impending dread and how bad, like how is this going to end badly for them? I feel like a lot of that is the product of the name on the chest.
That's fair.
All right, so we're both selling on Iowa. Penn State. You probably know where I'm going.
Are you buying stock in Penn State?
Yeah, why not?
I have a hard. So I want you to explain your logic.
I don't know if I'm buying stock in Penn State. I'm just not ready to sell. Does that make sense? That's a poor man's hold, but whatever.
So Penn State won at Michigan State. Super impressive. Mm-hmm. Efficiency margin stats say they're more average.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like. What is their great talent? And I think the Jones injury is important,
mm-hmm.
and I think that is maybe why they haven't looked so hot over the last couple weeks. I know he warmed up, I guess, yesterday, so maybe he's getting closer to coming back. But like, how do you get if you are a 4 seed and you draw, or a 5 seed and you draw Penn State in your pod? Are you worried?
Well, I'm worried that Penn State's going to fall to a 5 because I do not like Penn State in a 5-12 at all.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just bad vibes. But I do feel like it was a bad week, right? 2 straight losses, home to Illinois, at Indiana. But like, I watched both of those games, and the thing that jumped out to me was Lamar Stevens reverted back to junior year Lamar Stevens. He went 14 for 33 on 2s and 0 for 5 on 3s with 1 assist in those 2 games. It was junior year Lamar Stevens. It was not the guy who has been playing for the last month. And I gotta feel like they're going to be able to show some video to that dude of these last 2 games and get him back on track. Miles Dredd went 3 for 16 on 3s in those 2 losses. Like, there's a degree of 2 guys playing better, and this team is a lot closer to the version that beat Michigan and Michigan State than the one that you feel like can easily drop off. If that happens, I like them, right? Next Saturday is a huge game. Iowa at home, or I'm sorry, on the road, right? That's a rematch of that awesome game at the Palestra that was 89-86. Like, I'm just saying, I'm not ready to just dump on Penn State just because it's really easy to just say they're probably a fraud. There are guys who can play a lot better than they did this last week.
Yeah, I'm selling, but if Jones comes back, and you have to remember, he's the only guy who's really a reliable 3-point shooter on that entire roster.
Mm-hmm.
That is a key dimension that they really have never had under Chambers, or hardly ever, right? And having that one guy who can shoot does make everything easier for everyone else. So I'll give them a little bit of an out if he comes back and can give them something, but he's also been out sick for 5 games, and we don't know what kind of illness, but I can't imagine he's up to game strength right away, right? So that's a tough spot to be in too. I'm selling though. I would
also give it. I like Seth Lundy as a 3-point shooter on that team, but go ahead.
Yeah, he's coming. He's on the. But are you going to trust him in March?
No, I don't trust Michigan. I don't trust Penn State in March as a whole, but they've never been there. This is all untreaded territory, so who knows? But
that's fair. All right, who do we have next? Interesting one coming up.
Wisconsin. Very interesting. Their first game without Kobe, like, this has just been a bizarre season there. Their first game without Kobe King was the implosion at Iowa when they lost that impossible lead. Since then, they're 5-6. 4 of those have been home games, though. Michigan State, Ohio State, Purdue, Rutgers. But Wisconsin is very much in the conversation in the conference and safely in the NCAA tournament after they were pretty much left for dead, 3 weeks ago? It's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, they were 5-5 in December. Mm-hmm. They lost to Richmond, New Mexico, NC State. This is just like the most vintage Wisconsin season ever. Like, oh,
Yes.
here they are, double-digit wins. So no one thinks they're actually any good, but here they are, just grinding away victories. Did you buy or sell? I don't think you said.
I'm buying Wisconsin right now.
Okay.
Buying Wisconsin, I feel like to me means I think they can win a game in the NCAA tournament, which would have been ridiculous to think of not long ago.
Yeah, I think they're definitely a team no one in the Big Ten really wants to play. Like, I don't think you'd be excited to draw them in Indianapolis. I also just can't get that excited about this team. Like, I don't get it. I mean, they are benefiting from a little easier stretch of schedule, you could say, but I mean, they beat Michigan State, Ohio State at home. They've won road games early in the year, right? Ohio State, Penn State, like all the results say that they should be good. I'm still selling just because I don't trust. Like, I don't see the upside, right?
Here's my case. I like the fact we were just talking about Michigan's balanced offense. Wisconsin's, they're getting scoring all over the place. They've had 4 double-figure scores in 5 of their last 6 games. I like Potter coming off the bench. They started him 2 games. He didn't do much. They put him back on the bench in the other 2 games, and he scored 15 and 18. So you might want to keep him on that 6-man role. But they just put up almost 1.2 points per possession on Rutgers, which is not easy. Say what you will about Rutgers, but that's not easy. They're getting production. Like, you talk about role definition. Like, this team has role definition, and they can score.
Yeah, Wisconsin's offense basically 1.15 points per possession in 4 straight games, which is consistent, efficient. That's good offense. They've shot 37% or better from 3 and hit at least 10 threes in each of those games.
And it's all over the place. It's Pretzel, it's Reuvers, it's Potter, it's Davidson. Like, they're getting it at multiple spots.
You almost hit the 4 for 4 and said every name wrong.
That's right. That's what I was going for.
That statement. Impressive stuff here on the
Pretzel, Davidson, Reuvers.
I'll buy that. You're almost convincing me to buy it, but I'm still selling. Okay. I'm really curious to see how they play.
Me too.
At Michigan on Thursday, because that's a key spot for both teams. And it's weird to get into a game this late in the year where 2 teams haven't played. So I was a little intrigued when you're kind of stuck in this rematch setup.
Yeah. Okay. So we're split on Wisconsin. Illinois, this was my hardest team. So I'm going to let you do the intro.
All right. So Illinois was everyone's favorite team at the end of January. 16-5, 8-2. They were, I would say, pretty much a Big Ten title contender, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Then they lost 4 straight. AO got hurt. And
schedule got hard. And everyone was ready to write them off, and they went and won at Penn State. So now you're sitting there. They were off over the weekend. They played Nebraska Northwestern, looking like a 3-game winning streak on the horizon. And then all of a sudden, I think everyone's going to say, oh, wait, why did we forget about Illinois? Which is basically what happens in the Big Ten over and over again. Easiest remaining schedule in the conference per Bartorvik.
Yeah, their road trips are Northwestern and Ohio State.
So, what do you got?
Their offense, not great.
Not great.
They've won a lot of close games, and I think they have probably one of the best close game players, but that doesn't scream buy to me. They can't shoot. They don't shoot threes. Like, their defense is good. It's not amazing. So what's Illinois' ceiling, considering they don't shoot threes? They're not great offensively. I don't know what it is. Just hope AO goes crazy and carries you on an insane run. And that's possible. I think this is probably a sell, but I think I'll probably regret selling if they finish 4-1.
Right. So here, I agree with you on all of that. They're ranked 2nd in the conference in defensive efficiency, but they rank 13th in 3-point shooting percentage, 29%. They rank 14th in 2-point shooting percentage, 45%. it's a team that's reliant on offensive rebound, right? They're first. They're first in the conference in offensive rebounding percentage. But what's the point of grabbing offensive rebounds if you can't put the ball in the basket? So it's kind of hard. But at the same time, they're going to finish on the up kick. They're going to probably grab like a 6 seed in the tournament, and this is going to be a team that, like, I feel like once it's outside of the Big Ten, like some of these teams are going to see on tape and be like, "What is this?" Right? Like, you see Coburn for the first time, you see Io for the first time, and a lot of non-Big Ten teams might not be ready for what Illinois is bringing. And I feel like
counterpoint.
Okay.
Life outside the Big Ten was not particularly kind to Illinois this year. You could say they're maybe a perfectly designed team for the Big Ten, where everyone wants to play inside, no one can really shoot. A team that spreads them out could be worse, right? Like, how is this team going to match up with a little team with a pick and pop 5, right? I don't know.
I feel like those losses to like Arizona and Miami early and Missouri in early December, they were playing a little bit differently then as well. They were still trying to go like straight too big as their like primary lineup, if I remember correctly. And their defense has gotten a million times better since then. So, like, I mean, they gave up 90 to Arizona. No one in the conference play has done anything remotely close to that. The Missouri game that they lost was just, but that's the thing, right? Like, you never know when they're going to go out and shoot 30% from the field in a game, and that can happen. So, but you asked, like, what's their ceiling? The ceiling is if they could get a good draw in the NCAA tournament, and there's just not many teams have seen anything like what Illinois brings. So if you get a good draw, you can win a couple games. And I love Io, right? He's just a killer. Scored 20. That Illinois Penn State game was a slop heap, except for Io. Scored 24. And then Illinois held Penn State to 4 for 19 shooting, and Lamar Stevens was maybe his worst game of the conference schedule. Iowa was spectacular, and they got a good win on the road. My instinct would be to buy Illinois. But I don't love it.
The upside's Io. He could just go crazy and be the guy everyone's talking about the second weekend of the NCAA tournament, and all of a sudden he's the lottery pick, and that's how this story's supposed to end. I just worry about some of the other pieces, like what happened to Georgi Bashanisvili.
I know.
Like, is there a bigger? It's just him and Aaron Wheeler are just the complete fall off players in the Big Ten that we expected a lot more from. He was completely lost in that Penn State game and just seemed like a shell of the guy he was a year ago, right? He was supposed to be part of their future, and he's just not getting it done. So
shooting 41% on twos in the league.
Yeah,
he shot 57% last year as a freshman. 57% to 41%. Now he's playing a different position. Last year he was a true 5, and that's obviously where he should be.
Yeah, he's playing the wrong position this year.
Right, but what do? Do you just split 20-20 with Kofi at the 5 and him at the 5?
Because Georgie can't guard the 5.
Well, you can't not play the 5. You can't not play Kofi at the 5.
Exactly.
So it's it's always been kind of a personnel issue with them. But yeah, Georgie was 12th in the conference in 2-point shooting percentage last year, and now can't throw the ball in the ocean. It's pretty incredible.
So you're buying, I'm selling on Illinois?
Yeah.
That's one that could be interesting. That's one I'm the least confident, I think. All right. Are we getting into
who's next?
Rutgers next?
Rutgers. Let's do it.
You want to set the table for Rutgers?
Sure. 8th in the league.
I have some questions here.
8th in the league right now. They're at 9-8 in the conference. Number 1 remaining strength of schedule. Hardest slate to finish out. They go to Penn State. They host Maryland. They go to Purdue. Not ideal. They already have 5 losses in their last 7 games. They can't win anywhere except for the RAC. 17-1 at home. 1-7 on the road. 0-2 in neutral games. My only question when it comes to Rutgers is whether it makes the NCAA tournament or not. That's going to be our conversation here, probably. I am, unfortunately, though, selling the Scarlet Knights.
To give you credit, you sold a while back. You told me this was going to happen to Rutgers. So kudos on that. I think it's obviously a sell. The try hard and hope the other team misses their open threes approach only goes so far. And you're starting to see teams make a few threes, and then it's just hard for Rutgers to keep up. They really need to win one of these last 3 games to make the NCAA tournament. I think I saw them as like first 4 in a lot of brackets. You can't just lose down the stretch and get in. And there's no cookie cutter game here, right? Penn State on the road, Maryland at home. Maryland's going to be playing for a title. At Purdue, Purdue's playing for its life and is great in Mackey Arena. It's tough, and like I feel like
have to beat Maryland.
They have to beat Maryland at home.
They have to beat Maryland,
and that's the game. I mean, they had to beat Michigan at home. They didn't. If they lose out, like, who's your coach of the year in the Big Ten?
If I voted today, it'd be Chambers.
Yeah. Steve Pikiell's like getting nominated for all these Coach of the Year awards.
National Coach of the Year awards, which I
if
do
they
get.
Lose out
I mean, part of it is
I know
if he were coaching Minnesota, no one would particularly give a shit that they did this year, but he's not.
Do you buy into Underwood Coach of the Year at all? Like, is he a candidate to you?
No.
I
would go Chambers, Turge, Juwan.
Interesting. So the 3 that were nominated for the national were Pikiell, Chambers, Underwood, I believe. Those were the Big Ten nominations, which, like, I get a little bit relative to expectations. I'm surprised there's not a little more Juwan Howard Coach of the Year buzz at all, considering no one was picking Michigan in the top 25 before the year. Obviously you got other people's players and everything, but I thought that was interesting. I think Chambers is probably the guy, especially if Penn State can right the ship down the stretch, though, just because, 1, he's just been here forever and everyone seems to like him, and 2, it's Penn State basketball, and it's going to be one of their best years.
If they go 2-2 on the way out, finish 12-8 in the league, 22-9 overall, and they're a 4 or 5 seed in the NCAA tournament, I mean,
gotta be Chambers.
It's not only a Coach of the Year award, it is you did this. You put in your time at Penn State and did this. Here's a plaque for the last 10 years, a decade of achievement for A, not getting fired, and B, actually getting to the tournament. And I'll be curious if he turns it into a different job, but we'll see.
I also think it's a little bit harsh on Turgeon that if they win outright, that he doesn't win Coach of the Year. I remember when I think Tim Miles and Beeline shared it in 2014 when Michigan won the league by like 3 games. It's like, the best coaching job just whooped the whole league. I mean, you got to give Turgeon credit, especially if it's not a share, right? So I go back and forth on that because the case for Chambers makes complete sense, but you just kind of forget the obvious case of, well, the coach of the best team was probably the best coach.
But I don't disagree.
So we're selling Rutgers.
Selling.
We're hoping that they can figure out a way to win a game because although the Rutgers first round of the NCAA tournament stories would be a lot. I don't know if it would be as much as the Northwestern thing, but I'm here for it.
Not wanting to it would be great for the league for Rutgers to get in, first of all. It would also be, I mean, you talk about everyone liking Chambers, everyone likes Pikiell. And it's really impressive what he's done there. And if they want to get, there needs to be some significant upgrades at Rutgers. That facility is, I know they're building a basketball-only thing or have already built it or whatever, but the rack is, they have to do something with that building. It's ridiculous. I'm not saying blow it up. I say keep it, but then it needs to be updated in some way. So,
what is it, the trapezoid of terror?
Yeah, that's right. Okay, Ohio State is next. I'm going to let you can set the table here.
Ohio State is, for me, an easy buy. They were 2-6, similar to Michigan. Since then, they are 6-2. They have been playing very well. They are one of the higher-ranked KenPom teams in the league. I think I said back in early January that I still thought they were one of the better teams in the Big Ten. I still think they're one of the teams in the Big Ten that has a chance to make a legitimate run in the NCAA tournament. Also a situation where I think their roles work a little better without Carton. Not that Carton is a bad player, but it seems like just everyone buying into a role instead of this 2-point guard, who's our point guard, or they're both our point guard. I don't think that's a real healthy situation. Obviously, they haven't banked a ton of great wins over the last stretch, but the secret is most of these teams that are winning games are winning the more winnable games. Ohio State winning at Michigan is the kind of game that I think changes their whole season. They lose that game, I'm not sure where exactly they're at, but they're 8-8 and they are favored in 3 of their last 4 games. I think it's a pretty easy buy, and I also think, they had some really good non-conference wins. They whooped Villanova. They beat Kentucky. Like, this is a team that I think sets up well to play postseason basketball.
Interesting. So, I didn't
You're
know.
not in.
I'm not in on Ohio State. First of all, I want to know Kyle Young's status. That looked the way he landed on his ankle yesterday did not look great. Have you seen anything on that?
I have not. I just saw a high ankle sprain.
Yeah. I love the way CJ Walker's been playing. He's been pretty darn good of late. I obviously really like Andre Wesson and everything that he does. The rest of the team, I just don't love it. A guy like Luther Muhammad is just so crazy inconsistent. Yeah, he looked great yesterday, but before that, I think he made 16 threes in 15 Big Ten games. He was basically a 34% shooter. Their defense is not that good. 11th in the conference. I just don't feel it. I just don't feel Ohio State. I feel like it's a brief stay in March. That said, they'll probably finish out here. What's their remaining schedule is at Nebraska, home versus Michigan, home versus Illinois, at Michigan State. They'll finish what? 11-9?
11-9, 10-10, something like that.
I don't know. I'm selling on Ohio State.
Ohio State to me is a team that you put them in another situation and they could be better.
What players do you like on the team?
What players do I like on the team? So I've never been a big Caleb Wesson guy, but he has improved.
Mm-hmm.
I think that having a point guard helps. I like how they play. I like that they spread the floor around one big, and I know that I don't love any single one of their wings, but they all space the floor, shoot threes. I think that their defense will probably be better than you think once they get out of the Big Ten. They were a good defensive team before. I think they'll be one again. That's why I'm buying.
It's just like I feel like you rarely would see a Sweet 16 team where you wouldn't at least like point to like 2 or 3 guys and be like, oh man, I love that guy's game. Am I crazy?
I guess it would be more of like a system. Like it'd be like when Florida State makes.
You're buying Holtman. You're buying Holtman.
Yeah, I think it's Holtman. I think that obviously they've had some kind of rough finishes since he's been there, but I just like how they play, how they're coached, and I think that they've shown some neutral floor upside, and I'm curious to see how it plays out. I think they're a team I'd look at in Indy to win a couple games, and then in the Big Ten tournament or the NCAA tournament.
Okay. Let's see. Next up, Indiana, right?
Oh,
There's
Indiana.
the grunt of Indiana right there. So Indiana is tied with Ohio State for 9th in the league. They're both 8-8, 3-2 in their last 5 games. Am I looking at this right? Yeah. So their last 4 games are at Purdue, at Illinois, versus Minnesota, versus Wisconsin. The question is, can Indiana land in the NCAA tournament? People are getting hype. 3 wins in the last 4 games, and suddenly everyone in Bloomington is back on board. When I was down there a couple weeks ago, they were ready to burn the building down, fire Archie. They were ready to go pick up Beeline at the airport last week. But they're arguing about net ratings. It's almost March in Bloomington.
So, to be fair, I think that win at Minnesota is a big win. That's the kind of game that you have to win to make the NCAA tournament as a bubble team. Reminds me of some of those Michigan teams that barely snuck into the NCAA tournament early in Beilein's tenure and then went and won at Minnesota, and that kind of sealed the deal. Minnesota's not great, but they're good enough to beat on the road, and that really counts for something. Going to be a rough week this week for Indiana, and then it's going to be let's get back above level and win these 2 games at home and make the NCAA tournament. So pressure game still ahead, I think. But I think Indiana's an easy. Here's what I'd do with Indiana.
If you're about to say it's an easy buy, I'm shutting this thing down.
No. We're going to be a little smart here. We're going to hold Indiana until Selection Sunday, and then we're going to sell all of it at its highest price, and then we're just going to laugh when Indiana loses on Thursday in the NCAA tournament.
All right,
that's my play.
It might be a Tuesday of the NCAA tournament, by the way.
Fair. I don't like this team. I think they're pretty you compare them to Ohio State. Ohio State's a significantly better team, I think. To a degree where Ohio State's closer to some of the teams we talked about earlier in this podcast. Indiana, I just don't see it. So that's where I'm at. Indiana's the only Big Ten team with an RPI higher than its net, which speaks to me to the fact that their efficiency margin numbers are all pretty crappy. They lose on the road by a lot, win at home by a little. So, yeah, I don't love Indiana. I'm selling.
Because the question here that we're going to have to get into, do we both agree that the NCAA, that the Big Ten is going to get 10 NCAA bids?
I think that Indiana would be the 10th.
Okay, because the question is going to be, if we both agree that they get 10, which I think we do, who gets the 10th spot? That's going to be Indiana, Minnesota, or Purdue. So you're going with, because that's the ultimate buy here, right, is who gets the last spot. So you're going to take Indiana. Indiana has 2 road wins this year and is about to play at Purdue and at Illinois. There's a chance they go take 2 L's, and then it's going to be burn the bridges again in Bloomington before their last 2 games. I imagine 10-10 gets them in. They'd be 20-11 overall. I think that they'd probably not only be in, but get a win in Indianapolis, and you're probably out of the first 4. So they definitely have the easiest road of those 3 to getting a spot.
Yeah, they're
the easiest buy.
Up the best right now.
They're the easiest buy of those 3. Yes.
They're a sell for me as how good they are as a team, but in terms of their situation to make the NCAA tournament, they're in a better spot than the next 2 teams we'll talk about.
Yes. But in the spirit of controversy, I will just outright sell Indiana and say that this thing tanks and they're not for real.
Yeah, I think there's a real chance that the Big Ten only gets 9 teams in.
I don't think that happens.
I mean, Minnesota and Purdue are both 500 overall. 500 teams never made it. And do you see either of them? I mean, one of those teams will have to go on a real heater. I think that's correct that a 500 team is. You have to be over 500, I believe, is what I've heard. Could be wrong. Don't quote me on it, but it's hard.
If I had to buy one of these 3 to actually put a run together here, I'd be most inclined to take Minnesota.
Interesting.
And it's because it goes to my theory of you need players. And Minnesota still at least has 2 badass dudes, right? You know, I'll take Marcus Carr and Oturu.
Well, I mean, you have to give a little
I love
Jackson Davis credit. I think he basically got completely called out at Michigan, did nothing the entire game, and then dominated this week. I think should be the Big Ten freshman of the year. Statistically, he's better than Kofi Coburn by just about every sort of
Coburn's
box score plus minus. But yeah, Coburn's going to win it because Illinois is better. Fine. I think Trace is playing at a level where he should be Big Ten Player of the Year, and that qualifies as a dude, in my opinion, right? Like
Sure.
he's good enough to help them get somewhere that maybe he wasn't playing like he was good enough to earlier this year. Minnesota's other like Indiana's replacement level players are better than Minnesota's.
No
replacement level
doubt.
players.
No doubt.
Indiana's loaded with replacement level players.
Look, I'm picking against Indiana for the sake of picking against Indiana, just so that if it happens, I could say I was right. Full disclosure. Indiana's clearly the best pick to get the 10th bid. But I don't like them. And part of me does feel like, I don't know. Sometimes you just look at a team and say, maybe that team's got a little run in it. Luckily, they play each other.
Yeah, but they just played each other and Minnesota lost at home.
That's true. And
that was a huge loss.
I doubt they'll win at Assembly. That was a huge loss in hindsight.
Like it was a bad week. Minnesota blew that Iowa game at home, and then they lost at home to Indiana. Now they're going to have to beat Maryland at home, and then they're going to have to win at Indiana and beat Nebraska. If they do that, they're in. They have to finish 3-1 if Minnesota's getting in, I think.
And win a game or two in Indy.
Yeah, I mean, all these teams,
like Minnesota and Indiana are going to have those great, basically playing games on Thursday.
Yeah, two of Minnesota, Indiana, and Purdue. Purdue could end up in those games too. Right? I mean, they already have 10 losses.
Where? I'm trying to see right now. Where's that site? You're
not going to click through and make brackets in the middle of this podcast. We're cutting you off. So Minnesota, you're buying?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
I'm selling Minnesota just because I watched the Iowa and Indiana games, and you can't lose those games at home and make the NCAA tournament. I think this team could just kind of fall off if they don't win on Wednesday against Maryland.
Huge game.
Also, like the perfect spot for Maryland to drop a game, just considering the circumstances.
Well,
so
here's the thing with Maryland. You'll notice that their name keeps getting mentioned with teams that have to win these games. Rutgers, perfect example. That's a home game for Rutgers. Massive game. Minnesota, massive game. And Michigan State will want revenge. And Michigan, who knows what it'll be playing for in that finale. If Maryland drops 2 or 3 of these, that could conceivably be a game that Michigan might be playing for a share, which is insane, obviously. But this is all setting up for Maryland to basically be playing NCAA tournament games the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, well, NCAA tournament games for the opposition.
Right.
Maryland.
Exactly. That's what I mean. That's what I mean. Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah,
they're facing teams that are going in with that level of mindset. Not an easy spot. So Purdue.
You were there on Saturday.
Man.
You were also there on January 12th. Have you seen a more different?
Unbelievable.
You've seen Purdue's inconsistency up close and personal. You've seen both sides of it.
And I've seen and the pain in the face of Matt Painter just being fed up with coaching this group, it seems to me. Just reading the room. This is not I've not had personal conversations with Matt Painter. This is me just reading the room. But yeah, I mean, you want to talk about hitting the schedule at the wrong time. Purdue is just the perfect example of it. The last 4 games, they just ran into Penn State, Ohio State, Wisconsin, Michigan, which probably at the time that they played them were all playing their best basketball of the year. Not ideal. So that coupled with an offense which is just painful to watch at times has them basically on the brink here, and they're probably an easy sell. They're projected to go out 2-1, which would make them very much in that Final Four conversation. I don't know if they go 2-1. I do know that they're not losing 7 straight to end the season. They will pick off one of these teams, and that game will certainly have a great effect on the opponent.
Yeah, that Rutgers game to end the year is just like so painful for Rutgers for me because I think Purdue probably wins that. I could see them definitely going 2-1, Then they finish 9-11. They play on Wednesday in the Big Ten tournament. I could see them winning a game on Wednesday and then beating a bubble team to knock them out, and then both teams end up out of the NCAA tournament.
Yikes.
You know, like that just fits perfectly with just kind of how this Purdue season's gone. Who's coaching the teams will probably be playing on Thursday. It just feels like a good spot for me but I just don't see them winning enough in Indy to actually make the tournament, right? So they're kind of, I don't want to say they're drawing dead, but they're going to have to go 3-0 to close out this stretch of schedule, and winning at Iowa is going to be tough, you would say, right? I mean, Purdue killed them in Mackey, but Purdue killed everyone in Mackey just about. So what do you make of that?
Indiana has not won in Mackey since 2013. I agree with you. 2-1 sounds right to me because Mackey's going to be a snake pit on Thursday night for that Indiana team. The place is going. I don't even care what their record is. They're going to be ready to burn the building down. So I think Purdue gets a win there, and yeah, Rutgers. Shit, they'll probably win that game too.
Yeah, to be fair, I think we sold all three of the teams Purdue still has to play.
Yeah, exactly. Your scenario is chillingly probably accurate for all involved, but yeah. I also see Purdue finishing 2-1, missing the first round, losing the first round Big Ten, and just being done.
Yeah, they're not going to lose to Northwestern or whoever they play.
Well, wait, what if Minnesota gets... What if they get to Thursday? Purdue.
Okay, you say lose on Thursday and then just be done.
Right.
Regardless.
Right.
The other thing to consider is for Minnesota and Purdue...
You could actually make a case that Purdue could want... Right.
I'm going to say they want to play on Wednesday because they both need wins because their record is the worst part of their resume.
Yeah.
It's ass backwards, but it kind of could actually help them. And you have to remember, Purdue has really good computer numbers. Like their net is good. So if they can do just enough, they might have a case on the margins to at least make the first four or something like that. And it's going to probably be a huge talking point as far as like the bracketology stuff. Like these Big Ten teams that everyone's going to say looks shitty, but their numbers all look good. What do you do with them? Do you put a bubble team in from some one bid league or whatever else? So get ready for a lot of that on ESPN over the next month. But do they get in if they go, what? If they finish 10-10, or is Purdue a lock? If they win out?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You think so?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, that would give them a road win at Iowa.
Yeah, that would be huge.
Yeah.
What do they have to do if they go 9-11? Do they have to make Saturday or Sunday in the Big Ten tournament to get in then?
If they go 9-11, there's a chance that they would be in that Wednesday spot. I think you get 2 wins and you could be safe, especially considering who that Thursday game could be against. It'll probably be a quad 1. I think it could set up fine. And the game's in Indy, so they'll have a pretty decent fan contingent there.
So are we buying or selling? Did we already do that?
I don't think we did do it. I'll buy Purdue.
I'm selling.
Of those three, you know what? I think I'm going to sell Minnesota. I'm going to sell Indiana.
Buy Purdue?
Maybe I'll buy Purdue, which is insane. Or I should probably just stick to my guns and stay with Minnesota.
Yeah, I don't think... Do you think any of these teams are actually any good?
No. Not particularly.
That's what it comes down to for me. Like, they're any other.
I think they're among the 70 best teams in America?
70, but they're ranked like the top 40 teams in America.
No.
And that cushion of the fact that when all these other teams in the Big Ten beat them, it's like a top 40 win is like artificially propped up the entire Big Ten.
Totally.
Do you agree with that?
Yeah.
Like, Michigan just won at Rutgers and Purdue, but I don't think anyone thinks either of those teams is going to the Sweet 16, right? I don't know. I have a hard time figuring out what to make of the Big Ten at this point.
Well, that brings us to our final buy and sell, which in reality the entire season is coming down to Northwestern at Nebraska in what is the game of the year by far. That game is
March 1st.
Sunday. This Sunday. Can you remind me what the bet was?
You bet that Northwestern would finish ahead of Nebraska. I bet Nebraska.
Fuck.
But you could make it. I mean, there could be a tiebreaker argument here. If Northwestern wins, they would probably tie at 2, but Northwestern would have the sweep. So you would have a case that they would win the tiebreaker.
I
right?
would.
Nebraska would be the last seed. I would say, well, Nebraska actually beat a couple of real teams in Purdue and Iowa, which is hilarious in its own right.
We're not going to the net ratings or Ken Palm. It'll be we'll use Big Ten tiebreakers proper.
Oh, so everything is still on the line March 1st.
Absolutely. Big time stuff here. So they're both 0-5 in their last 5. Wait, what are the losing streaks at here? Nebraska was once 2-2 in the league, which is amazing. I don't know. I mean, we're both selling both of these. But what's your pick on the head-to-head?
I'm buying Nebraska's program. I'm in on Hoiberg.
And you're definitely selling Chris Collins.
I'm selling everything that has touched Northwestern's program.
Okay. It's fair. It's fair.
I'm picking Nebraska to win at home against Northwestern on Sunday. We're going to have to get the live stream up while we're at the Michigan-Ohio State game.
Obviously.
To watch the real action.
Obviously. Is there any chance either of these teams win a game that doesn't involve the other?
There's a chance. I would lean Nebraska because they've actually done it. But there is, I think. Who do they have left? Anyone?
Ohio State comes into the bank.
The bank has lost its luster. I could see Northwestern beating Illinois, and I could see Northwestern beating Penn State. I think those are teams that are good enough or bad enough to lose at Northwestern on a bad day.
Sure. Okay. All right. Is that it?
I think that's a wrap.
Man. That's a solid hour and 20 minutes of Big Ten basketball right there for the people. All right. I'm trying to think of how we're going to do this. At some point, we will have a Big Ten awards debate pod here coming up in the next 2 weeks. We're going to be following along as Michigan State finish this thing out. We might have a few kind of reacts pods on bigger games and stuff like that. Maybe shorter ones as opposed to just doing these kind of set episodes where we tackle everything. And we will see what happens in March. We will both be in Indianapolis for the Big Ten tournament. So daily pods?
Oh, boy. So we'll see when the games are.
True. If they're both playing in the morning, that's easy.
Yeah. If they're both playing at night,
kind of sucks.
Good luck.
Yeah.
You're on your own.
We got to make last call. There's no time for potting. All right. So that'll do it this week. We really appreciate everyone listening. We would implore you to go leave a review in the iTunes store. That helps us reach new listeners. And subscribe to UM Hoops. Dylan does great work over there. Subscribe to The Athletic. I'm trash, but everyone else does outstanding work. So check them out. And that'll do it. Folks, thanks. Be sure to tip your bartenders and your servers.